Welcome, everyone. I'm Ketan Patel. I'm part of the executive leadership team of the World Academy of Art and Science and a trustee of the board. I'm also the chair of Force for Good, and I'm delighted to welcome you here today to what is going to be, I think, a very exciting and interesting panel on mobilizing science and technology as a force for good. The panel has deep expertise and insights to offer us. We have people from various backgrounds, entrepreneurial, scientific, and academic, and intelligence services. I will make an ever so brief introduction that draws on our Technology as a Force for Good report to set the context very briefly. Then I'm going to introduce this very experienced panel. So number one, we're in the midst of a shift, of course, to an information-based civilization, and that is a profound shift that we do not educate the world on. It's a highly disruptive one, as much as the agricultural one was for those that were there before, or the industrialized one was for those in agriculture. So it's a time of great disruption. Every aspect of the human experience and the planet will be affected by this change. Today, we're clearly a multi-speed global society, where some people have not even begun to get to use the technologies of the industrial era, let alone other technologies that are now breaking new ground like AI. And other parts of society are at the forefront of this technology. So it's an incredibly exciting but divided time. Those countries and companies that master the next technologies, and our report identifies 19 core technologies, will probably be the masters of this planet as we go forward. They will have the technology and the value and the ability to promulgate their ideas and thoughts across the planet. Importantly, what our report doesn't say is that if the previous era of industrial civilization was the colonization of land and the peoples living on the land, this time there is an opportunity to colonize the mind and control the ideas and beliefs of people. It seems like an incredibly dangerous colonization that we're about to enter into. However, if our societies can be positively transformed using this technology, and if we implement the right policies, we create markets, not just needs, and we satisfy those needs. It requires us, of course, to set the rules of engagement for these new technologies. We estimate in the report that this opportunity is worth $15 trillion of revenue for companies that are innovative, but figuring out the rollout of technologies across the planet at the right cost. That's a brief context for a very interesting panel, which I'll briefly introduce. We have Glenn Gaffney. Glenn, raise your hand, please, is a tech strategist and innovator who, during his years of services at the US government, served as the Director of Science and Technology for the CIA and the Deputy Director of National Intelligence for Collection. He retired from there and entered into the world of technology ventures and became a director in a laboratory of innovation. Secondly, we have Dr. Marianna BOZESAN. Marianna is an AI pioneer, Stanford and MIT, award-winning deep tech investor, a successful serial entrepreneur, and the architect of a concept of integral investing. She also authored a book by that name, Integral Investing from Profit to Prosperity. We have Nebojša NEŠKOVIĆ. Nebojša is a theoretical physicist also involved in accelerator technologies. He's the Vice President for Science and Technology for the World Academy of Art and Science too, and a full member of the Club of Rome, and the president of the Serbian chapter of that club. His leadership positions include the Vinča Institute, the Tesla Project and Center, and the Scientific Council member at Dubna. Galileo VIOLINI. Galileo, do we have him? Is a theoretical physicist and science policy expert, co-founded the International Center for Physics in Columbia. He's a fellow of the American Physics Society and much awarded, including the Wheatley Award and the Joseph A. Burton Forum Award, has written more than 430 publications, a physicist and an expert and well recognized in the subject. That's my briefest of introductions that I can make to this panel, because I want to spend most of the time on this panel discussing these topics. I'll begin actually with Glenn. Glenn, here's my question for you, which is the question I'm going to pose all the panelists and ask them to reflect on. And if you'd keep it very short, please, 5 to 6 minutes, so we have a chance to come back around and address other questions and then build off each of your ideas and thoughts. So, Glenn, given your experience and expertise, what are the science and technologies which you think can enhance peace and security in the world?
So I think a couple of things, just briefly. I think one, I'll focus on AI because AI, I think, is an incredible enabler and will be a huge fuel for the next what we would call revolution, industrial revolution, although that's the wrong term for this particular one. AI will be what electricity has been, right, to previous generations. And as such, the way we think about it, the policies that we establish, to support it, the way that we train and educate around it will all be critical globally. And it's the diffusion of that technology into all of these other market areas that will change everything and drive economies and competition. So I hold AI out as separate for both the promise and the real concerns that are there. And I'm sure we'll talk more about those. The next one that I'll highlight is clean and renewable energy. We've been talking about this for a while, but when you think about some of the key things that are necessary to solve some of the other key tech problems in terms of things like, in terms of AI, of course, in terms of what we think about in terms of advanced compute, and where we think about the future of clean water and food solutions. So many of these are energy dependent, and our energy needs are growing exponentially, and we are not keeping pace with what's necessary in the infrastructure as well as the next generation energy solutions. And so I think these are key areas that are huge enablers for next generation and for some of the things that you've highlighted in the Force for Good paper.
Thank you very much, Glenn. I want to turn to Marianna. We'd love your thoughts, Marianna, on this. You're obviously very experienced as an investor in this too, but as a result, I think you see so many things walking through the door before you choose what you invest in. What do you think are the important science and technologies?
Yes, I would second Glenn's contribution to this conversation, and I completely agree with artificial intelligence, but and quantum technologies in general, and of course precision fermentation. For me, there are three major sectors of the economy that are extremely important in order to make sure that people feel secure and safe, and we move ahead with evolution of society as we progress. And so that is energy. And for me, within the sector of energy, quantum technologies using artificial intelligence or quantum information science with artificial intelligence that will help develop fusion reactors that provide the energy that is needed. And we can have this conversation. I'd love to talk about the energy crisis, because this is one of the biggest issues here, and it will be fun. Also, albeit a little scary. The other, and I would also encourage people to look at the law of accelerating returns that Ray Kurzweil put together, where he talks about Moore's law is, the end of Moore's law that's been on the way for the last 128 years. And now that is followed by photonic computers as the new technology that I'm pointing out, and quantum technology, analog computer, and so on. So those of us who are interested in digging deeper, and I've written, in the Integral Investing book extensively about those. Another thing that another sector that is important is food. How can we make sure, and we just heard in the previous panel, the disasters of climate change and how the planet is growing hotter and hotter, and how are we going to be able to feed ourselves with traditional agriculture, and that's going to be almost impossible. But precision fermentation and cellular agriculture will be able to provide us with that. Albeit we agree to follow it, because right now there is so much resistance for some reason I don't understand. It's a mystery. And then also healthcare. How can we use both quantum technologies, but also artificial intelligence to come up with precision medicine, to discover new drugs, and move ahead. So these are the major technologies that I'd like to point out at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianna. Very succinct and very profound too, actually, in terms of the things you pointed out. And I think there's a lot of overlap between what you've stated and I think what Glenn has too. Let me ask Nebojša. Nebojša, you've been involved in the nuclear industry and its energy too, and the traditional uranium-based energy, but you have much wider experience too. And given what you're exposed to with the WAAS and Club of Rome projects on science and technology, what would you highlight for us as the most exciting technologies that can make the world better?
Thank you, Ketan. My opinion is that in the strategy of science and technology of each country, special care should be taken about science with large research infrastructures called big science, to enable the establishment of direct, strong connections of basic sciences from particle physics and space science via material science to radiation chemistry and biology, with engineering, medicine, and high technology, and also to provide very much needed intercultural bridges and thus contribute to mutual understanding and peace worldwide. The successes of such scientific activities at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, CERN, in Geneva, and the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research in Dubna are clear proofs that dialectical unity of national and global approaches is a necessary basis for advancement and excellence on a wide front in science and technology, as well as an important contribution to true consolidation and improvement of international relations. I also think that every science model should include the request for education in basic research as the initial link in the chain of research and development at all levels, since that can intensively develop curiosity, courage, creativity, and persistence among pupils, and thus considerably contribute to a proper establishment of their personalities, and they are forming as independent and responsible citizens, ready to participate in solving the sustainability, security, and peace problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Nebojša. Thank you. Galileo, you have some overlap with Nebojša and experience. Would you mind also reflecting on the same question?
Yes, well, I will try to present a point of view of the South, I would say. One thing which I would like to start from is to say that when one looks at sustainable development goals and one makes the statistics, how much is done and how much is not done, one forgets that they are not equal. One of them is the problem of poverty. And the poverty is a tremendous problem related to science. If one looks at the economic growth in the last decades, one finds that there's been an economic growth. But if you look at the poverty, you find that it's stable. There's been a minor improvement from moving from rural to urban. But this is just a way of displacing poverty. Inequality remains. And also the priorities which are made, indicated, don't reflect the existence of a chain, the chain education, science, technology, and innovation. Moreover, one tries to indicate goals which represent shortcuts, innovation, now the discussion on artificial intelligence, the discussion on quantum computing. But what is important is not to make the South an user of these things. One must create capacity to produce these things, to participate in their development. And the geopolitical situation does not help. In fact, there is a tendency. I remember I was last year in this month, I was in Berlin, and in a meeting in which people were stressing the importance of cooperation between like-minded countries. Now, if one stresses like-minded countries, the price is paid mainly by the southern countries, because these are the countries which are penalized. What is necessary? It's necessary to promote big science, and not only the big science which is functional to the scientific interest of the North. The Southern Hemisphere is full of astrophysics facilities of first class. But if you look, there's only one synchrotron in Brazil, and that's all. Africa has no synchrotron. So promote light sources, sectors which are of importance for the practical applications for everyday life. I actually am involved in one such project. And we are promoting the Global South project of light sources. This requires interregional cooperation, is fundamental, but also requires that international organizations are not simply the place where one makes an agreement between countries, what the countries promoters of initiative. International organization must be proactive, and is really a pity that very often instead they only act in a reactive way to first world Indian countries. Well, one can say that these ideas I'm mentioning are costly, maybe. The point, it is a fact that in the South, the investment in science remains always very low. And this is a matter which I'm very old, but I remember when I was young, still was the same problem. The average of Latin America in science, 0.6%. When you have that Brazil distracts attention from the fact that the median is 0.4%. In Africa, only 5 countries have 0.6%. So one must go in this direction. Is it costly? Well, I would like just to end with one thing, and not returning to the problem that the military expenses are important. Do you know, have you ever reflected that 1 kilometer of highway may cost 10 kilometers of highway can allow to have a compact light source, 30 kilometers a synchrotron. It is a matter of priorities.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I want to come back around now with picking up some of the things that you've said and pose a second round of questions that are different perhaps from what we might have expected, which is what is stopping us rolling out solutions? And maybe I can start with Marianna. Marianna, if we've found a solution in one part of the world, educational, energy source, whatever it is, why are we not able to transfer it across the world? Clearly, we would love it if we could transfer the know-how and it could be built there. Or they could change the know-how we have in one part of the world to make it suited. But why are the ideas not flowing? And what do you think it would take to make that flow from your experience?
Great question, which is different from what we had
I know.
discussed
That's
before.
why I thought I'd ask you, because you're suited to answering this.
Well, but I brought the internet to Germany. I started the first company that went public on the German Stock Exchange, was the first nationwide ISP in Germany. And the internet is the response to that, and it is the foundation of how ideas are being propagated around the world. And humanity has never been more connected than today. The problem we have, and I think this is what Galileo also was pointing out, and Nebojša, is, how can we elevate the level of conversation, away from talking about nothingness. And, I love cats. I watch cats videos myself. I photograph cats. but that's not what feeds me. That's not what puts food on my table or on the table of those around me. So I think, you know, and again, it's a collective issue and it's an individual issue. Individually, we've never been able, people, you know, and able to access more knowledge, more know-how, more people than ever today. People you know, at the bottom of the pyramid, you know, they're rather not eat, but not get a smartphone, because that enables them to start a business, to contribute to the world, to educate their children, and so on. So I think we need to do that, but also at the top level, at the country level, at the company level, at you know, in general, we need to make sure that the distribution occurs, because the solutions are there. There's no reason why anybody on this planet should starve. But we see we're not able, politically, geopolitically, we're not able to come together around the table and agree on something that, you know, would help us all. So I think, and it all comes down to what Nebojša has pointed out also. You know, how can we open our hearts and connect, you know, the head with the heart? It's not just about science and you know, technology. It's also about, you know, who are we as human beings, and how can we integrate those? Because I think and this is actually what AI is putting on the table for us right now. You know, as we talk about making AI more human-like, or you know, put consciousness into those AI. Do AIs have emotions? Have you know, how smart are they psychologically? Can they guide us in a psychological situation? But unless we become, you know, we take a higher level of consciousness ourselves and understand what consciousness is and being a better human is, we won't be able to even translate, or you know, to a robot, you know, what it means to have dignity and higher levels of morals and ethics. So I think it's up to us.
I like that, Marianna, because a recurring theme through the first day of the conference was that our problem is inside us. We are damaged somehow, traumatized somehow by our human experience inside, and we're reflecting that on the outside world. And that's an enormous danger. And that does take us straight into the conversation of dangers. But Glenn, I'd like you to reflect on that, please, because you had a very privileged position of being able to access great knowledge on science and technology and its applications and the great innovations. And at the forefront, you could of those innovations, you could see where they were coming from. Can you reflect on both parts of this? So one, what stops us rolling them out? And two, what Marianna said earlier, what are the dangers if we are not okay and the machines, the AI, is superior to us somehow in terms of awareness and consciousness? We're a long way away from that, I'm sure, but what is that?
We're a long way away from it, but it's going to come faster than any of us are prepared for it right now. And I think that's really an important issue. But I do want to take a step back, because I think to answer your question about what's holding us back, it is a couple of things. One is the sense of competition and the way that we pursue that competition relative to economic power, right? Military power, national security groups, right? Those particular things. And because we tend to draw straight lines from technology to application, and our whole sense of the way markets get developed tend to be along straight lines. Nebojša's points, I think, were really excellent right up front, because we have to think about the science to the application, right? And we need to think about it in its entirety, from the enabling pieces of the basic research all the way through the multiple areas of applied research. And that applied research space needs to actually be broadened and be interdisciplinary, right? Specifically, in order to bring things forward in a way that is more humanistic, right? And not just focused on rapidly getting to a product that beats everybody else to that space. I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to talk about the second piece, and then I'm going to tie these two together. The second thing that I think is we really have a set of mismatched policies that are really driven by the way that we have interpreted market competition and these other things going forward. And an example of that is most of our policies relative to economics and technology are around trying to get to a monopoly first, right? Or get to a strong IP position and then capitalize off of that position across, right, a region across the globe. That's the sense of competition and protection around that space. AI is the first in a long time truly general purpose technology where a race to be first is not really going to define who wins or who loses in this space. It's the ability to diffuse the value of that technology through multiple markets, and our policies aren't actually geared to do that. And so taking some of the things that Marianna just said and trying to tie them together, I think there's a real need right now for us to develop what I call AI trust labs, right? In that space that is the space between the basic research and some of the incredible things that are happening in developing the AI, but then looking at how we build interdisciplinary research in the applied AI space, market by market, including social sciences, including the public not just in the markets that we know, but in some of the underserved areas and some of the areas that we want to actually enable to use AI to actually close the digital divide, not grow the digital divide. And if we actually partner in the next phases of research following that basic work, do it in an interdisciplinary way, test outcomes and see what's acceptable in that space, and do it in partnership with the public, we change the way that we think about market. We change the way that we think about value. We actually speed the diffusion of this incredibly enabling technology and do it in a way that focuses on the human aspects of this, not just the financial aspects of it. Alongside of that, and I'll be brief in this last point, is the policy piece. I believe there's a real opportunity here to think of policy not as a specific thing with definitive action associated with it, because we tend to have policy that either tries to lead and is over regulatory, or lags and waits, lets the market drive until there's a catastrophe and then it responds. I think it's better to think of policy as an elastic framework, right? And to think of it in terms of how do we use that framework to be adaptive, right? That then enables the kind of growth that's responsible growth with the kind of guardrails and ethics that are important relative to human, right? And relative to who we are as humans. And so the partnership between the policy community and these trust labs, I think, becomes a really important element. And if we think of it like we would, let's say, envelope expansion in the aerospace industry, you reach certain thresholds and then you grow and enable and are ready for the next level of application and growth in these different markets. Setting policies that allow us to do that, and then integrating these trust labs globally, because none of us can do this on our own, I think enables a different approach to the way that we move some of these key technologies forward, in particular on the AI side.
I have so many questions for you, which I'm going to have to hold, because in a world where multilateralism is falling, how do we do some of these things is a big question that comes up for me. But before I come to Nebojša, I want to come back to Galileo. Galileo, you highlighted something very fundamental. If we measure our success as a species by how we treat the most underprivileged in our world society, we are failing, because we have poverty rising, and systemic and structural poverty rising. We have conflicts and wars that will lead to more poverty and migration. And we seem to be ruthless at pursuing those wars at any cost. What does it take to address this from a science and technology perspective? Because it looks as if science technology makes us better at pursuing things that are not so good for the world, like wars and so on. And we're leaving out addressing fundamental basic needs.
I'll tell you, it's not an easy question. You understand what you're asking me. It is not an easy question. And the point is that I don't know where we should go. But what I know is that what we are doing, if projected to the next 20 years, when Africa will have more than doubled its population, is something which is that really unsustainable. So if one does not realize that the present situation projected to 2050, not to 2040, is already unsustainable, one cannot do anything. So what is the problem? I am a strong believer in multilateralism, but I also know that in this moment it is in crisis. But let me make a very stupid comment. I read recently what is the assignment foreseen in a recent bill of an important country to raise a frontier with the South. Well, that amount of money would be, just fit to make a comparison, the same that would cost to have a synchrotron operating, a first-class synchrotron operating during 25 years, building and managing, and would remain. Now, how much this would contribute to reduce the pressure, in my view, more than systems which cannot really made impossible the migration. The history of humanity is full of migration. If one looks back in the last 5,000 years, we've seen a lot of migration. In my country, we've seen all of them arrive to my country, so that in a moment or another. So that really, I think one should realize that one must make a multilateral effort to develop locally the developing countries. This is a choice. I mean, can one do that or not? I don't know. This is what I think should be done, but I know that it don't depend on me.
Okay. I'm going to take that as a partial answer and come back. But Nebojša, part of our problem is that we are losing control of the truth, or at least the effort to find the truth, because of how social media and populist politics are working. And also because actually people are open to untruths because their circumstances are so dire. Even in the richest of countries, including the US and Western Europe, 20 to 50% of people feel they are socially and economically excluded. And so poverty is rising in those countries, and the agendas that they wish to pursue are ones that they think will benefit them economically, not the global South or the rest of the world. Part of what you outlined is the need for basic science and the scientific method of thinking to be embedded in our education system at the youngest ages, perhaps, so that they think in this scientific way. Expand on that as a solution for our problems, please, and explain how you think we re-grip the truth somehow back.
Thank you for the question. I'll connect that to the question on critical dangers that science and technology can bring to the world, just to make the story complete. We are all aware of the possible negative impacts, for example, of computer and biochemical sciences and technologies on sustainability, security, and peace. However, I would like to mention and support a general approach to the problem based on the continuing following and assessing of potential dangers in acquiring knowledge within each discipline of research and development around the world. If this is done, this is a proposal, a general proposal, in a well-organized and firm multilateral way, as Galileo has already mentioned. This means within the UN system. These dangers could be effectively suppressed and eliminated before inducing harm to the humanity and the planet. I'm not talking only about AI. It is a general approach. We have to follow all sciences and all technologies in detail. But this is a serious task for the planet as a whole. Thank you.
I appreciate that very much. And look, I'm an economist originally by education and training, but I recently took a science degree, and reignited my interest in the scientific method and the value of doing that. Marianna, you have your hand up. Can I hand back to you?
Yes, thank you. I would like to maybe to bring in an aspect that addresses both your last questions, like what is holding us back and losing, how can we lose, why are we losing control of truth? And I'd like to go back to fear. And when we look at what's currently happening, no matter, in technology, but also politically, it's all, mostly driven by fear. And so the reason why I brought up energy and why I'm focusing on energy in order to balance it out has to do with the fact that people don't really know what the biggest problems are that we have right now. It's in everywhere around the world. And did you know that the United States is prone to lose power and go into a massive energy crisis by 2035? And that's due to energy. There is not enough energy. Most people talk about chips and not sending chips to China and not, keeping them in the West and so on. But that's not the problem. The problem are the data centers and the energy to power them behind it, which is the actual problem. And so, and if we think that the United States will go into a, sorry, I think I said 35, but it's prone to come into an energy crisis by 28, actually in 3 years from now. This has to do with the fact that the AI, that this fear and the technology that the West hopes to be using in order to win the game against China and blah, blah, blah. I don't want to go into this. They are going to focus on technology and artificial intelligence and all the power. So the utility companies that are currently run, in governmental hands are now being controlled by OpenAI, by Microsoft, so I would love to share the data if there is more interest on this, but this is the fear that is currently, excuse me?
Do it briefly, please. Yes, share.
Okay.
Or post it so that others can pick it up too if you want to give a link, but give us the key data points, and then I'm going to come to Glenn.
So according to people who know what they're talking about, among them being Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, the United States needs by 2030 92 gigawatts of additional energy in order to address the technological development needed in order to keep the position, in AI. And we can have a separate podcast on AI and why that is the case. So what does it mean? Do you know how many nuclear power plants? So 1 gigawatt is one nuclear power plant, and it takes 10 years to build it. During the last 30 years, the United States, and I'm using this as an example, has built exactly two 1 gigawatt power plants. And in order to keep up with the competition, fear again, we need 92 such things. Now, and I will be able to, after this intervention, to send the data link, as to how much OpenAI is planning to. So they're planning to build 10 gigawatt data centers within the next couple of years. Well, imagine where is the energy going to come from in order to power these data centers? This is 92 additional gigawatts within 10 years from now. So.
You've raised a profound
which
point.
means the implication of that is that Microsoft, OpenAI, Meta, and all of those are going to do everything, given the money they have, in order to make sure that this energy is being available. Now, the implication for the normal people, and with 1 gigawatt energy, you can provide a 1 million, like a middle city, a million city inhabitants. So this is the fear that is currently regulating and dominating us, and we need to address that. Thank you.
That's a very important point, and I think you've just highlighted our challenge. The more we try to advance society for a small number of us, the less chance there is that those that are left out are going to share. And energy is a key conflict point in some ways, how to do this. Glenn, please, you had a point to make, and would you reflect on that too? Because I remember talking to a tech company, and you were with me, I think, when we had this dialogue, and they saw Africa and they said, you know, economically, it would be justified to have maybe one data center amongst 3 countries, but only 3 in the whole of the African continent. And then it would be marginally economic to do so because of the quality of the demand and the profit potential. So it wasn't really that economic. But if you could figure out how to do it cheaply and you put the data centers down across the continent of Africa, you would probably own the data and those customers for decades to come. But that's not a leap they're ready to make.
Yeah,
Please, let
and
me
I
hand
think
back to you on the question you wanted to raise, or the point you wanted to raise too.
yeah. So it just maybe I can connect all these pieces. Just
Please.
in the last point that you made, I think a lot of the problems, particularly when companies are looking at extending into areas of the world, and particularly in the global south, and the conversation that you and I had with this one company vis-a-vis relative to Africa, was that their business model is wrapped around sovereignty and sovereign control of the data that's in that space. So it's one center, one data store per sovereign country. And I think there are good and relevant examples of creating shared data spaces and still respecting sovereignty.
Yes.
And understanding some of the basic science breakthroughs that are happening in ways to actually protect data and protect information will allow data interaction and the protection of sovereignty. So not only has it been done among countries who have decided to actually invest and do it, but there are new technologies coming down the pipeline from some of the research that's being done, and now moving into the applied science areas that will further enable this. So there's opportunity here. I want to come back. I put my hand up because on the education question, because I think it's a really important, it's a critically important time for us, not just in globally, right? For us globally in this space, which is we need to, oddly enough, the technologies that are making our life easier, or another way to say it, and I hate to sound like I'm just harping on AI all the time, but as we build systems that become more human, we are becoming less human at the same time. We're not teaching critical thinking skills. We're teaching application skills. We're not teaching how to deal in probabilities in a probabilistic world, right? And given those probabilities, what does the critical thinking look like as we're approaching these different kinds of systems problems? So the problems and solving these problems with a real focus on our needs as humans, right? Protection, society, food, water, poverty, right? Yes, there's a need for multilateralism, but there's a need for systems thinking and critical thinking in that space, which can be and should be built upon some of the basic science pieces in the education world that Nebojša, again, was talking about and highlighting in this space. I think there's real opportunity here, and there's a real need and there's real opportunity to do this. Lastly, I ponder, and part of the last conversation, I heard Phoebe talking about this a little bit, Phoebe Konduri, on the economic side and natural real world assets. But I think, and natural real world assets is a good example to use. But I wonder sometimes if there's not opportunity to take technology that we have in terms of cryptocurrency and what have you, and not think of it just in terms of what it means on the currency side, but what would it mean to actually build this out across an education system that we then began to teach and let kids, the next generation, right, begin to look at value propositions differently. And what would a futures market look like if we began to think about futures and have the valuation follow a cryptocurrency like example for those kinds of assets? I believe that we would begin to invest in things differently and begin to change the way that we think about value recognition as opposed to value extraction, right? And in the development of these things. So I think there's some key areas here that are important to develop.
Thank you, Glenn. We're in the last 5 minutes, and this format, when you have people with such deep experience, is very difficult to extract enough value in, even for to do something which is a little bit unfair, which is, I have a reflection on what you've said and how it translates into solutions. But for all of you, could I ask you to highlight, based on what you've said so far and what you've heard, what is there's no magic bullet, but if you had a magic bullet that you think is a solution that technologically, scientifically, that would help the world, what is that? And I will ask Nebojša to go first. Nebojša, what is that solution you would, if you had a chance to champion one thing, what would it be?
Okay, let me say one thing I think it's missing in our discussion. It is clear today that acquiring knowledge along the chain of basic, applied, social, and humanistic disciplines by scientific communities worldwide within the disciplinary boundaries must often be supplemented with multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary analyses followed by transdisciplinary syntheses. When I say multidisciplinary, I mean additive and enriching. When I say interdisciplinary, I mean interactive and wider. And when I say transdisciplinary, I mean holistic and novel. However, each of such exploration efforts should be performed in the non-positivistic way, meaning that the final objective, after describing a phenomenon on the basis of the data experienced, should be to reach and comprehend its essence. And finally, I would like to underline the relations between science and art as two distinct but complementary methods of inquiry about nature, society, and human beings with the same aim: to unravel the sense of the universe and communicate their findings to others. The results of science, being objective, and the results of art, being subjective, should influence and enrich one another, and thus push further the boundaries of a true understanding of the universe. Thank you.
I like it. Very well captured. Thank you. Galileo, can I ask you to go next? Again, we have a minute each, right? So
I will tell in 1 minute.
Please.
What I would like is that a discussion like this, which is of tremendous interest for 20% of human population, world population, becomes interesting for 100%.
Yes. Okay. I like that too, but I hope we get to 20%, but that's good. Marianna.
Well, I'm so fired up because I know that there is, I don't know whether it's 20%, but what I see in Europe, the young entrepreneurs, they fire me up. They give me so much hope. The young people, they have gotten it. And all of these amazing PhDs who are currently using the technologies that I already mentioned, quantum algorithms to develop new drugs, precision medicine, precision fermentation to develop new foods from food rests, better algorithms to distribute the food that is being developed. Quantum technology combined with mathematical artificial intelligence, not those that hallucinate, but there is real mathematical computation that is currently being used with quantum algorithms, and it's happening today. It's developing stellarators that, for instance, Proxima Fusion and Kipu Quantum, these are amazing companies that is, are going, the first quantum fusion reactor is going to go live in 31, so just a few years from now. And this is all what gives me a lot of hope because it's real, it's happening now, and the money goes in the right direction, so we're doing something right.
Thank you. Thank you. I hear interest and passion. I feel it. Thank you. Glenn.
Okay, to answer your question in less than a minute, the one thing that I think, if I can only get behind one thing and champion it, it would be biotech, right? And specifically as it relates to global health. and global health, not in the macro sense, but in group by group senses. And one of the things that I think is fascinating here is as we think about applying things like AI in the biotech and the global health space, it is the richness of diversity that actually makes the model stronger and makes the model more applicable in this space. And so the inclusion of local groups, regional groups, right, helps the AI modeling and the bio and the health solutions, right, as a whole, both in the macro and in the specific. And I think this needs to be addressed if we're going to make the world, right, safer, better.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to put my one forward then to end, which is I wish it was AI for the purpose of advancing knowledge, human consciousness, and collaboration, because we will find all the answers out of that probably if we could share. And AI probably is a tool to help us do that. I want to thank a great panel. You've been ever so disciplined and ever so succinct at putting forward some very big ideas. I wish we had a back-to-back panel where we would just go deep into solutions even more, because I think we only began to touch on that. And that's the nature, I think, of this subject. It's so wide. Thank you very much.